So we are going to go ahead and get started with today's live stream. We are talking about sex, marriage, love, relationships in general. I've gotten a few questions from you all about different aspects of relationships. So we're going to cover all of those different things, especially from a traditional perspective in today's live stream. So before we get started, definitely, guys, if you're watching live, feel free to go ahead and put your comments in the chat box on whatever platform you're on. So we're only on YouTube and Instagram today. So go ahead and just put anything in there and we'll talk about it as we go along. If you are watching the replay, type replay in the comments, guys. Let me know what stood out to you most. Let me know if you have any additional questions or anything like that. Greetings, greetings, greetings aside you. Thank you for showing up. Guys on IG, I don't know why this is stuck again for me. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? Because it is stuck and it did that last time. I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with that. But let me know if you can't hear me and see me both. Okay. Alrighty. So thank you all again. As I said, I'm going to cover the pre-episode survey. All right, thank you. So you guys are saying you can see and hear me. I don't know. Maybe it's the app because I used this the last time I used the app on my computer. Maybe I just need to go through the actual IG window as I've been doing before. But thank you guys for letting me know. I appreciate that. But so we're going to go ahead and jump into the pre-episode survey that you guys took on YouTube. So I asked you guys about like what have you heard and things like that. What do you feel is most judged when it comes to these dynamics? So about 43% of you all thought that people were most judged when it came to being unmarried, right? And this is a big thing we're going to definitely dig into. 21% thought that people in the EFA community are most judged for not having children. So it's a little bit less. 18% thought that people are judged for having sex outside of marriage. That surprised me because I thought that number would be a little bit higher, but I guess not, right? And 18% likewise thought that people were judged for having children outside of marriage. So definitely there's judgment, there's stigma when it comes to all of these things, plus more. And we are going to dig into all of those dynamics today. The episode ended up becoming much more fuller, even so, because of some questions that I got on IG and YouTube. Well, I did get a few on YouTube, but those questions were already planned to be answered because you guys had asked about that before, because this is a much requested topic. So yes, greetings, greetings, greetings. Our Adissa, thank you for showing up. Likewise. So let's get into it. First thing I want to discuss though is the stigmas, the connotation of marriage and children in Yoruba culture and the Ifa tradition, because these are two different things, and a lot of what people are getting or it from the stigma portion of it and being ostracized and things like that, or feeling like they're being judged, actually comes from Yoruba culture, Yoruba society, and not the Ifa tradition, which are two different things that are heavily interlinked. Even for people who don't practice Ifa within Yoruba culture, they're still influenced by it because it is part of the tradition, the culture from that landmass. Even if they're practicing Christianity or Islam or what have you, they still have some of those traditional roots within their culture for a great majority of people. Everybody really, of course, everybody throughout the world is moving away from tradition, but the roots are still there, very much so on African soil. So when it comes to marriage, childbearing, things like that, in Yoruba culture, Yoruba society, absolutely, this is very, very highly valued, right? And it is a sign oftentimes of somebody being more mature, somebody being responsible, respectable. It's also an important sign of social capital. So when somebody has children, it's more than just bringing someone into the world, but it also shows your status in society, because most of the time when people traditionally had children in Yoruba culture, it was because they had the means to take care of them. It wasn't as we see today, especially like in American society, Caribbean cultures, and even so in Yoruba land, where a lot of people are having children and can't really take care of them as they should. It was very different in previous times. So if a person had children, it meant that they had the wherewithal in many instances to care for children, especially the more children that they ended up having. Likewise, children were a means for somebody to be taken care of when they got older. So it wasn't this notion of like a elderly care home, nursing home, and things like that that we see in the Western world, where somebody ages out and they go and get into a nursing home, a skilled nursing care, etc. type of unit, and then they're cared for by strangers for the most part for the remainder of their lives. Instead, in the Yoruba culture, in African cultures in general, it is so that people are taken care of by their offspring. So this is why having a lot of offspring was important during those traditional times. Even so now, because there's not a social welfare system in Yoruba land in most African cultures. So that is our social welfare. That is how we are taken care of in those particular regions of the world. So it was very important, still is very important, because the person understood when they got older, they needed somebody there to also be able to care for them. And so to take care of their children was a really big thing, right? In traditional Yoruba society, likewise, having children was also very, very important for continuity of the bloodline. So the belief there is that our ancestors come back through us, right? It's the same thing really in science, because science teaches us, about DNA and things like that. And DNA is just the regeneration of the ancestors, those who came before us. We carry their DNA, their essence within us. And so that's the same notion of, ancestors coming back and returning, etc., through bloodlines. And so in order for that continuity to be there, somebody had to have children, right? And so this is why children were and still are very, very important in Yoruba society and culture. Now, that's the cultural aspects of it. Now, let's dig into what Ifa says about it. So, likewise in Ifa tradition, because it is based off of ancestral lineage, anything that you do in the Ifa tradition, when you get those readings and things like that, it's always going to tie back in to your bloodline. Even so, things like initiation, right? A lot of times, even so, in readings, well, I don't say a lot of times, but it does happen where sometimes you may even have to feed the ori of your mother and your father. And definitely it'll come up that you need to feed the gungun, which are your ancestors, okay? So, and even so, like when you think about getting a reading or something like that, what do? They ask you for your mother's name in today's world. In previous times, it was the father's name, but, as I've said before, nowadays it's like mother's baby and father's maybe type of scenario. So in order to get it right, they just typically ask for the mother's name. Even so, that's very important, because everything, again, hinges on lineage, heritage, etc. All right. Ifa also considers marriage and children a blessing, right? In most instances, especially when it is healthy, in marriage, that being when the marriage is healthy, and also when the children serve a good purpose in a person's life. So if you bear children who are good, who are productive members of society, those things are considered a blessing. Even so, in Ifa, it'll teach you sometimes some people have to have children in order to experience certain blessings in their life. And if they don't have children, they won't manifest those blessings, because again, things do come through our bloodlines. And even so, like, you may start off something in your lifetime, but it wasn't meant for you to complete that. It may be meant for your children to complete it. And if you don't have biological children, it won't be there in the same way. Of course, you can adopt and things like that, But if the blessing is meant to come through your bloodline, it's just not going to be the exact same. So just wanted to start there with the importance of the fact that marriage and children are very, very vital in both Yoruba culture and the Ifa tradition. Now let's look at what Ifa says about, being single and being childless, because this is something that was requested. People wanted to know, like, is there a stigma, and what do you do about it, etc. So in Yoruba culture, absolutely, there's a major stigma surrounding this notion of a person not getting married for whatever reason it may be, or not having children. It's not even a thing in Yoruba culture for somebody to say, I don't want to have children, at least not traditionally. Nowadays, people are changing their mind about those dynamics because of a lot of times with poverty and things like that. So people who may have grown up in poverty, they're saying, well, I don't want to have children now. I want to have children later on once I'm settled and I'm in a better position financially, because I don't want my children to go through the things that I went through, right? So we do have that dynamic going on in today's world, but it's not really a thing like you see in the Western world, where people like literally choose not to have children, even though they may be socioeconomically really well off. They just say they don't want to have children, and that's just not something that's common. It's not considered to be normal in Yoruba society or culture. All right. That being said, too, women definitely are judged much more harshly than when it comes to these dynamics than men. Unfortunately, this happens for everything, really. Most of the things that we're going to talk about today, women tend to be judged more harshly because of it, right? Even so, in previous times when a couple did not have children, even though they were married, oftentimes the woman was automatically blamed for it. But nowadays we know, like, there are situations where the man actually is, I won't say it's his fault because it's nobody's fault, but it may be a situation where he cannot produce children in the relationship. So it's not on the woman all the time. Even so, the woman tends to get the brunt of it when no children are coming through within the marital relationship. And even so, if she's not married, she oftentimes gets the pressure, especially at a younger age, than a man does. And that has a lot to do too with, the dynamic of what a woman would go through if she's single and she's out there and being with different men, reputation and things like that. A man just isn't going to go through that. If he's with a lot of different women, that's considered to be normal. He's just being a man, this type of dynamic, instead of it being looked at both ways for each. There's definitely a double standard there, and that's throughout the world. Now, with that being said, Ifa definitely is rooted in your ancestral lineage. However, it's not guaranteed that you are going to get married or that you're going to have children. We talked about this in other live streams, and there's so many different reasons why this may not happen for a person. So Ifa is not going to automatically judge or blame a person. It doesn't judge or blame at all, not the tradition, right? Society does, but not the tradition. Orumula is not going to judge a person. Instead, it's going to help the individual understand why this situation is the way it is. If somebody has a prolonged period of not being married and they want to get married, you can check and see what's going on. Same thing with children, etc. All right. But it's still very, very important, even though it may not be manifesting in the way that a person desires for it to manifest, or in a time frame that the person desires for it to manifest in. Okay. So marriage, obviously, that's the institution for procreation, for children to come through. Children are the perpetuation of our bloodlines. So they're the fulfillment of destiny. They help us to fulfill our destiny more fully in many ways. Some people, again, it's not even just blessings from a perspective of what your child is going to do for you, because some people are destined like to have children that are going to be very famous or very wealthy and things like that. And if you don't have biological children, that's not going to happen. It won't necessarily happen through adoption unless you adopt a child who that's part of their destiny anyway. But also from the perspective of there are certain lessons that you may need to learn through your own biological offspring. And you may not get those lessons unless you have biological offspring. So that can create challenges for you. Asaju, you're asking, does Ifa ever flatly recommend someone to have children? Absolutely. So it'll come up. It can come up in a reading that like you're meant to have children. You're meant to have these blessed offspring. So you need to take care of yourself, or maybe certain even like warnings or taboos that are associated with that person. Like you need to not do XYZ so that your children will be blessed and healthy and things of that nature. And as far as it being recommended, like that's kind of a blanket. Yes, it's pretty much always recommended that someone has children with caveats though. So it's not just bring children into the world just because, but you should be well equipped to take care of children too. So there's a responsibility associated with it. You should have a certain level of maturity, obviously, in order to bring children into the world and be able to teach them and help them to grow in ways that are going to help them to be productive members of society as well. So it's not just like going, what is it, be fruitful and multiply type of energy. Yes, you should be, but with responsibility, right? So Ifa is a system of wisdom. So in this tradition, an individual, you're not going to be considered to be an ancestor unless you have children. There's other criteria and stipulations, age, respect for life, etc. But children, being a parent, is also very vital to you becoming an ancestor in the afterlife when you transition to the astral realm. Now, obviously, biological children are the number one way to become a parent, but it can also be through adoptive measures like formal adoptive measures, surrogacy. And what I mean here by surrogacy is like you are helping to raise a child that's not necessarily yours. I'm not referring to surrogacy in the sense that, the way people get pregnant type of deal, but you act as a surrogate parent to maybe children in your community or your neighborhood, or even to like maybe nieces and nephews and cousins and things like that. So those are also ways that you can become a parent, and that's very vital in you transitioning properly into the ancestral realm. So but when it comes to the notion of like the pressure to get married, the pressure to have children and things like that, you always want to filter that through divination. Because yes, as you asked, it's always a recommendation, but at the right time and with the right person as well. Because you don't want to just have children with anybody. You don't want to go out there and just make babies just because, or get married just because somebody's telling you that you need to get married. You don't want to adhere to that pressure. That being said, when it comes to tradition, people are always going to go and seek divination for those major life decisions, right? Somebody embedded in tradition, historically through their bloodline or what have you, when they get married, they're not going to just go and get married to somebody, right? It's a whole, first of all, the family has to be involved in it, both sides. And divination is integral to that, to make sure that this couple is meant to be together, right? And then what do they need to do in order to solidify their connection, their union, in order for it to be harmonious and things of that nature? And they will do that throughout, of course, the lifespan of their marriage or what have you, okay? So it's not about what other people are saying or thinking or trying to get you to do. Instead, it is about what you need for your own destiny. And that information comes through divination and understanding, exactly what's what through Ifa. Okay. Ifa can definitely reveal if two people are compatible, give guidance on when it's time, when it's a good time to get married, when it's not a good time to get married. etc. It's not about forcing people. Ifa is not going to say you must marry a specific person either, right? And so for those of you all, the women who get reading sometimes, and I've heard this too many times that it shouldn't even be a thing because it's not a thing in Ifa, but I've heard many times people saying that women's been told that they must marry their owl, right? And that is not correct. It may come up in the reading that a woman is supposed to be the wife of a babalawo, but not that specific person, right? And of course, that's a huge scam. That's a huge fraud that is being perpetuated, unfortunately, in the tradition. So if somebody does come and tell you that you must marry a specific person, like, no, you need to run away from that person because it's not forced. You're not compelled. Even if you are compatible with a person, you're still not forced to marry that individual. Ifa can also reveal any type of roots or remedies for barrenness, because that's a big thing, right? So if a person is unable to have children, and I outlined this later on, but I'm going to say it here as well. If a person is barren, they're infertile, then that's oftentimes considered to be spiritual in nature. So that's the first thing that they're going to look at, is why this person is not able to have children, and go and seek out ways in order for that to happen for that individual, because fertility is huge in the tradition. Now let's transition to the notion of being married and sex, and where does all of this, come into context, right? So in traditional Yoruba culture, is typically going to place high value on purity when it comes to a female. As I said before, this is not a thing for a male. I'm pretty sure they're told, to keep themselves, to not be out there too much. But I don't think probably too many Yoruba fathers would tell their sons, like, be a virgin until you get married type of deal, because they understand the nature of man. They probably just tell them to exercise responsibility more so with that. And I will just, if I'm wrong in that, let me know. But I just don't see those conversations probably happen too tough when it comes to men. But when it comes to women, whole different things. They're taught to, keep themselves, because again, reputation, a woman's value is tied to her purity, right? Her value as a wife. If she's been out there with a lot of men, then oftentimes, even if the man wants to be with her, his family will usually say, no, like, this is not the right woman for you, because she has a reputation in the community, and it's not seen as a good thing traditionally, historically, right? So, this is a lot of times why you will see, not even just from Yoruba land, but in Africa in general, like if you see a woman like scantily clad or something like that on social media, is always these types of comments like, oh, she's never going to get married, and these types of things, because that is culturally grounded and rooted in many African societies, that, a woman is supposed to present herself as respectable, pure, mature, things of that nature, because her value is highly tied to that. Now, while many lineages encourage sexual discipline, Ifa doesn't just specifically or strictly forbid a person from having sex before marriage. There's no Odu that says you should not have sex before you're married, like we see in the Christian dynamic, where you're told, not to fornicate, not to engage in sexual relations before marriage. There's no Odu that pinpoints that. However, there are warnings, there are taboos connected to adultery, right? Cheating on a person's partner or something like that. Sometimes that actually comes up in people's readings, that they should not cheat on their partner. They should not step outside of their relationship or what have you, because it can create major imbalances for that individual. So that's frowned upon for the most part, even culturally, especially for women, right? It's frowned upon for men, it's from the women, but at the same time, there's actually a cultural expectation that the man is going to go outside of his home during their marriage. This is part of African culture in general. Though it's not like something that the women want by any means. It's just normal. It's just an accepted, I should say, part of society. Now, also when it comes to sex, it can be restricted for many reasons, especially when it comes to initiation. We talked about that before. So during an initiation period, a person is usually told they shouldn't engage in sex, right? Certain rituals, ceremonies, you may not be able to, you should not, I should say, have sex. Nobody's going to stop you from doing it, but you should not have sex for certain periods of time during special events and things like that. Certain types of a culture you can take where you're told that you're not supposed to be engaging in sex during certain times. During that period when you're taking that akosha, you'll be told that it's not all akosha. So don't think if I get some spiritual medicine, I can't have sex, because that's not the case for everyone, right? But there are some rare situations where that happens. It also can come up as part of warnings or taboos and things like that. So, that's definitely outlined in Odu, sex and things like that, but not that you shouldn't have sex before you get married. There are so many other Odu that speak on ethics surrounding sexual behavior, consequences, exercising restraint. So it's not like you have a free fall to just do what you want and think it's going to be okay and not impact you spiritually, physically, mentally, or emotionally, right? Even so socioeconomically, because it can, and it does when you engage in sex with multiple partners, varied partners, things like that, and you do so in a very reckless way. It can definitely impact your journey in many different ways. Okay. However, whenever you do channel sex responsibly, right? So you're dealing with sex with the right partner, it can actually be very, very beneficial. You can manifest a lot of things through sexual activity with the right person, rather, right? You can even so increase your personal power, your energetic balance. Sex is meant to be a good thing. It is a good thing when it's exercised right and responsibly. So it's not about don't have sex, or you're only supposed to have sex just to procreate and things of that nature. Instead, you're supposed to use it to bond emotionally with your partner. But again, that's with an aligned partner. It's not just with any and everybody. Because on the opposite hand of that, when you use your sexual energy in the wrong way, or in a, I won't say wrong way, but if you use it in a way that's not to your benefit, it can definitely negatively impact you, get you out of alignment. All right. When you're dealing with the wrong people, you're dealing with people with the wrong type of energy, they're transferring that to you. So, we all know about sexual diseases, also sexual demons, sexually transmitted demons can be transferred during sexual intercourse. So you want to be careful with that, because it can impact you physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually. As I said before, it can impact you in so many different ways. So you want to be careful with who you are engaging in sexual relationships with. All right. Sex can also be purposely used in evil spell work. Okay, some people know how to carry these dynamics out and get with people and basically take their essence through the act of sex. If they know what they're doing, they can absolutely do that. This is one of the major reasons you want to be very, very careful with who you are engaging with sexually. Sometimes people even report it happens quite frequently, unfortunately, when a person gets in a relationship with somebody and they start having sexual intercourse with them. What can happen is then that person's life starts to go down, right? And usually they can't pinpoint it, that it's because they're dealing with that person. And the other person may not be engaging like intentionally in evil spell work. It could just be their energy is bringing their other person's energy down to the point where their life is just completely different. The person may have been, doing really, really well. It could be male or female, absolutely. So it's not just, a man doing this to a woman. A woman can do it to a man as well. The person could be like doing well before they get with the other individual. Life's going good, balance, finances good, health good, etc. And then they start dealing with someone, and then all of a sudden they go down. They could even so become like homeless or something like that, dealing with the person, while that other person could either be in continuously be like in a bad situation, or they may end up coming up. Usually if they end up coming up, that's because they're doing some type of evil spell work. So one person's life goes down while the other person's life goes up, because that other individual whose life is increasing is using that person's essence intentionally. But there are situations where, again, the person just doesn't know, like their energy is just not good, and so when they get with another person, they bring their energy down as well. So this is why you want to be very, very careful there, as I said before. That being said, IFA does absolutely offer protection and remedies to address any type of issues you may have from such scenarios when it comes to engaging in sex, or any type of consequences that can come along from those types of dynamics, or either other types of sexual trauma. So, sexual abuse, people who have dealt with that in the past, there are remedies that can help you out a lot. We just did the interview recently with Addie, who, Addie, I think her name is, sorry, that she talked about, like, she had experienced sexual abuse beforehand when she was younger, and she went through IFA initiation, and she felt like, she's been relieved of that energy. She no longer feels that heaviness and the emotions, excuse me, the negative emotions that are tied to that experience that she had when she was younger. And she got that through the initiation journey. And of course, that came with a whole lot of different remedies and things like that. So it can absolutely help you if you've gone through any type of sexual trauma, whether it be, childhood sexual abuse, or even so just dealing with, wrong partners and going through all these types of soul ties, etc. All right. So now let's transition to polygamy. So when it comes to polygamy, it's absolutely part of traditional Yoruba culture, right? It's nothing for a man to have multiple wives. That being said, people are kind of moving away from it now, right? Um, it's not as prevalent as we used to see back in the day. All right. That being said, it's also not a universal expectation for everybody in society to engage in polygamous relationships. Even so, in historical time, that happened when a man was financially, socioeconomically, I don't want to just say finances, because he had to have himself together if he was going to engage in that type of behavior in a respectful manner. Because most of the time, a father is not going to give his daughter to a man that is not properly prepared to care for her. So if he's already married, he has to show and prove that he's able to take care of another wife. Again, traditionally, historically, it's different today. There are, unfortunately, polygamous relationships in Yoruba land and outside of Yoruba land, where people engage in these scenarios and the man is not properly equipped to care for the wife and the children that come through that relationship, or those relationships rather. All right. In Ifa, so that was the cultural aspect of it. In Ifa, it's neither promoted or prohibited, right? So polygamy is definitely allowed. There are Odu verses that speak about polygamy, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But it's also not like you get into Ifa and you have to engage in a polygamous relationship, because I know some women feel like that's the case for them when they come into Ifa. If they get married to somebody in the tradition, that they would have to deal with polygamy if that's what their partner wanted. You need to have that conversation beforehand. It may be something that happens or that transpires down the line, but you definitely have to have that conversation. It reminds me, when I was saying this, it reminds me of the episode on Good Times when Thelma, she was about to get married to the Nigerian. He was actually Yoruba, and she was so excited. And this is for those of you all who know about Good Times, right? I know I'm dating myself, but yes, I used to and still do watch Good Times on occasion. So in that, she was about to get married, and then what happened is they was all celebrating and things like that. Her mom didn't want it to happen, but she was excited about it, and they went to celebrate it at his house. And then the conversation came up, and I think the family had talked to her about it, if I remember correctly, beforehand, right? It's common for them to marry multiple women, etc. And anyway, the conversation came up at the celebratory dinner before she was about to go and move to Nigeria. And it came out like that. He said that she asked him, like, you wouldn't do that. And he was like, it's not something that he had in mind at that time. But culturally, this is part of where he comes from. And it could end up happening, whether it's something that he wanted or not, could be family pressure. So I say all of that because it came to my mind, number one. But it is something to think about, especially if you are marrying somebody who is Nigerian, right? If that looks like a woman, like outside of the Nigerian culture, marrying a Yoruba man, it could be the case. So do have that conversation. It could be that that's something that he wants, and he may be assuming that it's okay with you because you're practicing within the tradition. So keep those dynamics in mind, because it is part of the culture, it's part of the tradition. Okay. But also rather the Odu, there are several Odu that speak of, the Odu rather speaks of it being beneficial for a man to have multiple wives in certain instances. So it could even come up in a divination session that a man should be married to multiple women. All right. And it will be beneficial to him because, again, sexual energy works both ways. It works in, the affirmative, and that, you with somebody and it can bring so many blessings and benefits to you. And it also works in the negative, where it can take energy from you. So in a case where it would be beneficial for a man to marry multiple wives, obviously he's going to marry women that he's aligned with, and that can bring him so much wealth and so many beautiful things into his life. All right. But it's all about responsibility. This is not about just going and taking a lot of women. It's not about the sex, even so, right? Polygamy in traditional times was even more so about populating the nation. It was about bringing forth a lot of children and also protecting women, because it's a phenomenon. There just tends to be more women than men overall. So the women who were left out, who would never get married and then be relegated to being like an old maid or never being married, or either being somebody's, side piece, so to speak. So to, make an honorable woman out of her, it would be better for him to go ahead and just marry her within a polygamous construct. And that was okay. So it was for protection. It wasn't, what we see in today's time that is a lot of times even so outside of tradition. I'm not even talking about tradition when I say that, because I see this online a lot with a lot of polyamorous relationships going on. And it's really today's where I think it's more about a social flex than anything else. But true polygamy, responsible polygamy, is what is promoted in the Odu. All right. A person can fully participate in Ifa, though, without being in a polygamous relationship. It is not a must. You can absolutely, go through the tradition, being with one mate, and that being okay. Nothing that you have to do. Entering into such a affair or situation is not good unless you are prepared for it, as I said before, mentally, emotionally, socioeconomically as well. So there are many dimensions to this. So I don't just encourage polygamy, though I feel like that we would be better off as a people group, Black people, holistically, if we return to the dynamic of polygamy in a rightful way. That's another conversation, right? And I did talk about that a little bit in the episode that I did with Yeye Feeney. So guys, check that out on YouTube channel where we discuss, it's also on Spotify, I think too, where we discuss polygamy. So she actually talked about her experiences being in a polygamous relationship and how that panned out or what have you. So check it out if you want to know more about that dynamic, right? Definitely want to go through divination, get a reading when it comes to engaging in such a relationship, because it can be detrimental if it's not with the right people who are involved, right? So again, we're talking about tradition, so everything should be done from a divinatory point of view to make sure that it's good before you enter into such a relationship, especially when we're talking about multiple wives, right? Not just 2 or 3, but 4, 5, 6 plus wives. That can get you into a whole lot of problems and a lot of situations. I saw that firsthand when I lived in the Middle East, because polygamy was and still is absolutely a thing out there, and I was able to see it from like a bird's eye view perspective. And in some situations it was beneficial, and I actually liked what I saw. In some situation it wasn't. It was a total mess, right? But again, it's not also about only the money, because in those situations where I saw it, even when it was a mess, the money was there. Oftentimes it was well more than enough money than the people could even think of. Average person, I would say, could even think or dream of. However, the other dynamics were not put in place, and of course they were practicing Muslims, so divination was not a big part of that. So moon shining wrong, I think that's how you said. You're saying that's the Odu that deals with polygamy, I assume, right? um So you want to do this from a respectful manner, right? That's a whole nother conversation, and I think a whole nother level of preparation when it comes to the diaspora. Because though I believe that we should return to it, I don't feel like the diaspora is ready for it, right? So it has to be a whole lot of preparation, education behind those dynamics. All right. What Ifa teaches about divorce. We're going to get into divorce next. You're saying you're at work, can't wait to watch. Okay, thank you. Absolutely. A lot of treasures here. We're talking about. Turn the phone off. I literally turned the phone off. Turn the volume off. I definitely remember that. Sorry about this, guys. Let me get into it. Okay, I'm sorry. It's saying it's off. I gotta check it. If it beeps again, forgive me. It's a new phone, so I gotta figure it out. But going back to what I was saying, while divorce and separation, these are heavily frowned upon in Yoruba culture. They're not seen as failures, like in Ifa, right? So like in Catholicism in particular, I know this is considered to be like a massive thing for a person to get a divorce. It is heavily stigmatized, heavily frowned upon within that dynamic of Christianity, right? And so a lot of times people will stay married in the Catholic faith just because they do not want that stain upon them. I think it's even like, supposed to be equivalent to getting them in hell, or in a lower part of hell, because I know they have different tiers or what have you. When it comes to a person getting divorced, it's not like that, right? You can absolutely get a divorce. It's not probably the most favorable if the situation can be worked out. So you definitely would get divination to make sure that that's the route you want to take. But if a situation is no longer supporting your destiny, or if it wasn't supporting your destiny in the first place, right, or your well-being, parting ways may absolutely be necessary and or advised through divination. So that's what you want to do there. If you can salvage it, especially if children are involved, definitely always the recommendation. But again, everybody is not meant to be together. So definitely, guys, do not force that situation on yourself. if it's not something that you want or you feel like is appropriate for your life. Okay. Remarriage after divorce is fine as well in the Ifa tradition. Again, it's about alignment. So anytime you go down that path, you want to check. The challenge for most people in the diaspora is they come into the tradition later in life after they made those types of major decisions and had those scenarios play out in their life, and so it does end up in these types of situations. But it's not like it's no salvation for you if you choose to get a divorce or something like that. You can also, and should, I always recommend, do some type of cleansing or something like that if you do go through a divorce or a major separation, because soul ties were definitely created during the sexual process of you being in that relationship. And even so, because you were married to that person, if it's a prolonged period of time, this is going to probably impact you more so than another relationship may have, depending on the nature of that person's energy. Okay. Sorry about that. I got to figure that out. What Ifa teaches about infertility. So as I said before, when it comes to infertility, person not being able to have children, this is usually looked at from a spiritual perspective. So it's like, you can't have children, we need to fix it, right? It's looked at as something that needs to be fixed because there's a problem. And it is, and even from a health perspective, because if you have a functional womb as a female, and if you have, the ability to produce sperm as a male, then there's something wrong, because naturally the human body is supposed to be able to reproduce. And if it isn't, there's definitely, health challenges going on, if nothing else. Likely some spiritual challenges as well. So you have to check into that and see what's going on. So many different ways to remedy that: sacrifice, offering, spiritual medicine, even sometimes herbs. I didn't put that on there, but it could be herbs if the issue is purely physical. But even if it is purely physical, oftentimes a person will still deal with spiritual medicine when it comes to something like infertility, because we want to make sure that that process happens the way it should happen, right? So that children can manifest through that union, right? Let's see. Adoption is also supported. So for anybody who maybe comes from like a Islamic context where adoption is not supported in that tradition, Ifa does support adoption. Again, proper intent, guidance. I would definitely do divination if I was thinking about adopting someone, especially like outside of my family. If it's a situation within my family, I would still check and see what I could do to make sure that it goes well. But, you may not have the same choices to make in those types of situations, as far as like, no, I don't want this child. I mean, you always have a choice. Let me not say it that way. You may not feel like you have a choice if it's a family member or something like that. But when it comes to like outside children that are like not biologically related to you, definitely check, because it could be some problems. But adoption is allowed. It's not to say you can't adopt, right? Because I know that it's not a thing in Christianity in the Western world, but it is in Islam. What Ifa teaches about single parenthood. So being a single parent. Single parenthood is often heavily stigmatized in Yoruba society and culture, even so to this day. And herein, this is important, especially for those of us in the diaspora. Understand that when a person, when a couple separates and they're no longer together, the children are involved. Well, when the children come out, period, let me say it from that perspective. When a child comes out, in the Yoruba culture or society, that child belongs to the man's family. It doesn't belong to the woman's family. So the incidence of single mothers is a complete anomaly to people in Yoruba land. It doesn't make sense, because the child isn't supposed to go to the mother, it's supposed to go to the father. That doesn't mean all the time that the dad takes care of the children solely by himself, because oftentimes if he's going to be single and he's not going to get remarried right away or something like that, the children may go to his mother or his sister or an aunt or another woman in his family to take care of, or he may bring a maid in, right? But the society is very patriarchal in that regard. So they don't understand, like, why is it that when, a couple separates in American society in particular, why is it that the child goes to the woman and not the man? Because, in that culture too, even though women are allowed to work and they absolutely do work in Yoruba culture, the man is still seen as the primary breadwinner and provider of the home. So, why would a child go to a woman who is not able to care for them properly in their eyes, right? And I definitely agree with that notion that it should go to the man's side, but we got it completely mixed up in here in America, especially. Even so, in a lot of Caribbean cultures, it's like that as well, where the child or the children would more so go with the woman, and then she ends up struggling and so forth to take care of them. And so, but lineage is born from that angle in Yoruba culture. So that to see a single mother is not only stigmatized, but it's like considered as something really, really strange and out there to them. They understand it more now because they understand more of American culture, but this is not part of their culture or society, all right? Marriage provides that social structure, legitimacy for children. So that's a major thing as well. If a child is born within the context of a marriage and something does happen to that relationship, or even so the dad or what have you, if the marriage is in place, then the lineage or the inheritance can go on to those children. However, if it's a child outside of a marital union or bond, there will usually be some problems there, right? Especially if the man was married and maybe he made children outside of their home. It could be a lot of issues with the children outside of that dynamic being able to get any part of the inheritance or anything that belongs to them. So that's majorly important. In general, right, two-parent households are seen as more stable from a traditional historical perspective. Definitely some caveats here, even in Yoruba culture. So I'm not the one to say you got to have two parents in the household in order for everything to be good, right? Because there are some very unstable two-parent households, and that creates chaos as well. But unfortunately, being from a broken home, and that again, that phenomenon of a broken home is more so indicative of American society or culture, or Western society. I won't just say American because it happens in other westernized nations as well. But when you take it from the context of Yoruba culture, even when that separation comes, because the extended family then comes in to take care of a child, it's not missing the child. It's he or she, the child is not then missing out on that opposite end, that female energy, right? It's two, the mom can still to play a role in the child's life. It's not like the mom can't be there at all, because it can. But the child will still be surrounded by that collective communal type of environment, and it won't miss out as much as a child who comes from a single parent home in like the Western culture, especially when the woman is the only one that's taken care of and the woman is struggling, and then the child misses out on the father figure and all those other dynamics, all of the challenges that we have. All right. So, traditionally, and even in American society, in any society, not just American, but in any society, it's ideal that a child be raised in a healthy two-parent home for many, many different reasons. You're saying, if I'm a donor for an artificial insemination and my sample assists in a pregnancy, to Ifa Arun, would that count as me having a child, considering it is my DNA? Absolutely. So that's your biological child. Now, from a societal perspective, it just depends on, like what is that going to look like? It's considered you having a child, but if you're not raising a child too, because that's another part too when it comes to being an ancestor, if that's what you're asking about. So you actually have to raise the children and do right by the children and bring them up and make them sound and solid and things like that, and make them productive members of society. That even comes when that even is part of when it comes to somebody having children, right? And the children are in the house with them, right? But the person might not be taking really good care of the child. They could easily be neglecting or abusing the child. And so then we also, and I should have said that too, like you're taking good care of the child. It's not just having a child, but rearing the child properly. That also is what counts towards you becoming an ancestor and you being situated properly when you do transition. So it's not just that part. But yeah, I mean, biologically, you would still be a dad if that's your seed that is used to inseminate the person. Now, culturally or traditionally, that's going to, it will even be hard because, first of all, that's like, again, not a thing in traditional culture. Do people do those things, especially the ones who have lived in America and have integrated in Western culture? Absolutely. But when you're talking about on the landmass, like, no, this is not something that you are really going to see happen where with the artificial insemination and things like that, because then you get into a whole new territory when it comes to those dynamics. But it's a good question though. But it's definitely, yeah, there's so many different caveats when it comes to that. So yeah. Also, when it comes to childbearing, right, it's viewed as a collective responsibility, as I said before, on the motherland as a whole. Definitely in Yoruba culture, it's communal. It's not just those two people. This is why marriage, choosing the right partner, is so important. This is why the families are involved in the marriage and the relationship, the courtship, and all of that type of stuff, because they are all making that decision collectively if those two people should get married. So it's not even like that just those two people are getting married. Really, it's two families getting married, right? You even hear people referring to like the husband or the wife as our husband or our wife, not just where's your wife? Where is our wife? Like when the family comes over and visit or something like that, because everybody is married. And I'm not saying that funny way. I'm saying that from the perspective of it is very familiar, communally oriented. Like we are all in this together. So if the couple is having problems, we come together as a family and we resolve this problem. When we see what's going on, we get divination and see what can be done, right? And the family comes together and tries to work out these scenarios. That's how that looks. It's not like in American society you just get a divorce or we're gonna separate and things like that, and there's no wise counsel behind that because the family understands the importance of their couple staying together for so many different reasons. Okay, so that's how that works out. While cultural expectations can absolutely, they do devalue single parent families, IFA does not reject them. IFA is not a rejection. There's so many different things that you can do, right? It's not going to stop you from fulfilling your destiny if you end up in a situation where you are a single parent, you're raising a child by yourself. It's not like your Orisha stop supporting you and they're angry with you or the ancestors and so forth and so on. Obviously, all of our spiritual teams want the best for our lives, but you make that final decision. We have free will. So you're going to make that last and final decision as to what you do, and you're going to deal with whatever consequences come from that dynamic. Okay. IFA definitely provides us with so many different resolutions, solutions, etc., to help single parents out. So if you're going through something as a single parent, which will be common, again, their support is not there. On the opposite end, in many instances, hopefully you will have additional support from your community. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all in the Western world, because there are some situations where when people deal with having to raise a child by themselves, they have major league support in the Western world. However, it's not as common, and it's not, in my opinion, as replete as what you would see in Yoruba land and in a lot of African cultures, right? And there are some exceptions as well there, because of course there are children in the adoption system, and there are children also who come from single parent homes that struggle. So it's not like an absolute on either end. I'm just talking about historical or traditional societal structures here. Let's talk about contraception and abortion. So, contraception, like preventing you from having a children, stopping children from coming through at a certain time, family planning, things like that, it's not condemned at all in EFI. It's a personal choice. You decide what to do and when to do it. It's actually better in certain instances if you are not properly prepared to take care of children, to forego having children for a while, so that you can get yourself in that space, especially if you're married or you're sexually active. Doesn't make sense to bring children into the world and not take care of them properly, okay? There are even so natural remedies that you can take, different types of kosher that you can take to even help prevent pregnancy. So if you want to go the natural route, you can absolutely do that, and IFA can help you out. So if you're like not into taking birth control, or maybe you don't want surgery and things like that, you can do those types of things. All right. I wish I had been in a tradition at that time in my life, because I didn't do it for long, because I did take birth control for a while, but I learned after so long like that wasn't good for you or what have you. So I stopped taking those, and I ended up getting pregnant. That wasn't like the point of it, right? So it happened. And after that, I did get a tubal ligation after my second child, my daughter. So I only have two children. But if I had known about these methods, I definitely would have did it, because I'm so much more so into natural medicine than the allopathic route or what have you. But it is what it is. It happened. I don't want any more children, so we're good there. Miscarriages, right, are typically going to be perceived as a spiritual phenomenon as well, just like a person being infertile. So we're going to look at that from divination, right? We're going to handle that through different Ebo and Akoshe, etc. If a woman miscarries and she's consistently miscarrying, even one time, we got to look at it and see what's going on. But if it's consistent, we definitely know something is going on there, and we're going to try to see what's happening and get her some help and healing for that dynamic. All right. Intentional abortion as opposed to unintentional abortion, because in the medical field, a miscarriage is actually an abortion too. So that's why I put intentional here. It's approached with nuance, right? So this is not something that is supported at all in the tradition, but it's no judgment. So it's not like somebody's judging you and saying, oh, well, Ifa. People may judge you. I'm not going to say people don't, because they absolutely do. In Yoruba culture, they absolutely would. But the tradition is not here to judge you. But this is not something that is supported at all, right? Because of the notion that we talked about before. Children are about continuity of the bloodline. So when you abort, you are stopping, you're cutting off part of your bloodline. Even so, there are certain blessings, as I talked about before, that should come through your children, that may come through certain children that you have. If you cut those children off, obviously the blessings are not going to come if you purposely go in and cut them off. Even so, through miscarriages, I talked about before, that not being the person's fault, not being the woman's fault. However, if it is happening, it's still the same dynamic. Part of the blessings of the bloodline are being cut off. And so we want to remedy that so that those blessings can come on through their particular bloodline. All right. So you always want to consult Ifa if you are thinking about terminating a pregnancy to see what is best in that particular situation. All right. So, those reproductive choices that you make can absolutely impact your destiny, impact, your Ashe, those ancestral connections. It's very, very important to have those conversations and get balance. So also, let me do say this. So if you have gone through this, it's not about, shaming anybody. If you have had a situation where you've aborted a child, there are also remedies that you can utilize to help to restore your constitution, restore your Ashe, restore balance in that situation. So it's not like all is lost because you went through that. But I definitely would recommend anybody who has gone through an abortion to voluntarily or otherwise, but especially voluntarily, that you've chosen to abort a child, I would definitely advise you to consult with Ifa to see what you need to do in order to restore your balance, right? Because that's a big deal. That is a big deal in the tradition. All right. Homosexuality. So I finally got to this subject. You guys asked me about it. I've been foregoing this conversation for a long time because it's so very nuanced. But I'm going to talk about it because I was asked about it on multiple occasions. So here we go. When it comes to homosexuality, it is not accepted in traditional Yoruba culture, as most of you all probably know, right? Very much so heavily stigmatized and ostracized. Historically, traditionally, it could actually get, a person unalived, so to speak, when it came to these dynamics in traditional society because it wasn't tolerated. It's still very much so ostracized in today's world, but that perception is changing. A lot of it definitely has to do with the influences from the Western world. Also, it exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist because homosexuality absolutely exists in Yoruba culture, in Nigeria, in Africa, but it's not something that is easily accepted by the majority of society as we see in the Western world. Same-sex relationships are considered to be incompatible with traditional values when it comes to those marriage, having children, legacy building, because it can't happen in the same-sex relationship because no reproduction, no procreation can come through in those dynamics. Now, of course, these are Yoruba cultural societal beliefs. What does Ifa say about this? So there's no Odu that specifically mentions homosexuality in the modern context, in the modern words that we use. You're not going to see LGBTQ plus type of terminology, maybe even so the word homosexuality there, right? But traditional interpretations of the Odu consistently affirm that there is no real benefit or productive outcome to same-sex relations because you cannot produce a child. Offspring cannot come from that situation, right? And so this is the same for pretty much anything that you do. Anything that you do should have a beneficial outcome in your life. This part of walking in gentle character, Iwa Pele. So even if you're the type of person, let's say you just sit around and you watch TV all day long and you do nothing else, and you're able-bodied, you're able-minded, you have no excuse for this type of behavior. There's no beneficial outcome. No productive thing is coming out of you just sitting around watching TV and not doing anything. And so that's not considered to be something that you should be doing either in the tradition, right? According to Ifa, everything that we do should have a point, should have meaning, it should add value. And so that same dynamic comes when it comes to same-sex relations because it does not result in an offspring. It can never result in an offspring, not the relationship itself. Okay. In most of the Orthodox lineages, those that adhere to tradition, homosexuality is considered to be taboo. All right, particularly if your destiny involves you producing biological offspring for a reason. Because as I said before, sometimes in people's readings it will come up that you are destined to have certain blessed children. If you're in a homosexual relationship, you cannot do that biologically. Adopted children do not substitute in these cases because their blessing is going to come through your lineage. So this is one of the main reasons behind that, okay? That being said, this topic is not approached in the same way in Ifa as it is from a Christian perspective. So it is not like you are going to burn for all eternity in hell's fire if you are engaged in a same-sex relationship. That's not the way it's treated in tradition, okay? Instead, you are told like you should definitely get divination and guidance to see what's going on in your journey. You're not going, according to the traditional way, nobody's going to try to compel you to not be in a same-sex relationship. When it comes to you like getting a reading or something like that, nobody's gonna say, no, you shouldn't be involved in this lifestyle, you're gonna go to hell, or you're not going to make it to the ancestral realm, and those types of conversations. Now societally, yeah, you will probably be told not to engage in such a relationship and maybe ostracized and things like that when it comes to a strict Yoruba, traditional Yoruba culture. Okay. Some diaspora practitioners reinterpret the teachings of Ifa, the Odu, and they may say, it's inclusive, and they may say it's okay. But again, because we're operating off of lineage and bloodline, that's how you perpetuate your own generation, your own people group, and the tradition as a whole, right? So you get a reading, it's based off of ancestral lineage. You cannot continue ancestral lineage in that relationship, in a same-sex relationship. Now, obviously, yes, there are other measures and mechanisms that you can use. So you might choose to go and make a baby with somebody of the opposite sex while maintaining that type of relationship or what have you, those dynamics. I mean, and then the child would be biological in that instance. So then it's up to you if you want to maintain that same-sex relationship, if you're still going to try to go and make biological children. So there are absolutely ways that you can deal with that if you want to make biological children, but as a whole, the relationship in and of itself is no beneficial outcome, and that's pretty much what Ifa teaches there. All right. These reinterpretations, these are cultural adaptations. So just be mindful of that when you do research information pertaining to this or talk to people who may say something opposite. Okay, because it is about the perpetuation of generations at the end of the day. That being said, Ifa teaches that you should be respectful of all aspects of human life. So 9 times out of 10, if you come into an Ifa community or a temple, you will be accepted. We absolutely accept people who are in same-sex relationships. In our temple, we work with them, have a number of clients who are in the LGBT plus Q plus community. And I'm not being disrespectful. Sometimes it's hard for me to get the letters out. So if I miss one, forgive me. I don't judge. You can do whatever you want to do. I personally don't care who you have sex with, as long as it's not my husband, I'm good, right? But other people may. I don't have an issue with it, right? That's, like I said, that's the way I feel about it. But culturally, that's how Yoruba society feels about it. What do you say? What was I about to say? In E5, as I just said before, that's how it goes. So you're saying 007 Kemet, right? Is polygamy practiced among women as it is among men? That is, can women? So polyandry, no, not in Yoruba culture. In some African societies, absolutely, polyandry is that's a woman being married to multiple men is absolutely an acceptable practice. Even so, in some African cultures, it is the only practice where the woman marries multiple men and the man does not marry multiple women. But in traditional Yoruba culture, no, it's the polygamy aspects of it when a man marries. I mean, I forget what do you call it when it's just the man marrying women. I can't remember because polygamy refers to either one, but I can't remember the word for when the man is the only one that's involved in such a polyamorous relationship. All right, so I'm going to close up here soon, guys. A few more points to share with you. If you have any questions, let me know before I transition out. So Ifa teaches, guys, that each person carries their own unique destiny shaped by their ori, right? Not by societal expectations, not by societal pressures, what other people think about you. That's not what it's about, all right? Marriage, parenthood, celibacy, divorce, reproductive choices, sexual preferences, etc., they don't measure your worth or your value whatsoever. When choices are made with intention and guidance, okay, they should support your balance, your overall well-being. All right. You're saying thank you so much. Enjoy your information. Thank you. Polygyny. Yes. Yes, you are right. Thank you for that polygyny. Right. Yes, I already said the polyandry. I talked about that. I just couldn't remember the polygyny word. But that's the polygyny is specific for men marrying multiple women. Polyandry, if I'm pronouncing it right, I might not be. It's when a woman marries multiple men, for sure. Um, you are not defined by what other people think about you, no matter what you've done, no matter how you even feel about it, right? It's about your destiny. It's about your ori. We are all going to make decisions in this lifetime that we probably regret and felt like we shouldn't have made or wish we hadn't made. I have made several of them, right, in my lifetime. But you're not relegated to the decisions that you've made, or definitely not what other people think about you. It's more important for you to fulfill your destiny. And a lot of the things that we go through in life are actually lessons that teach us along the way, even though we may regret those decisions later on. But there's always redemption, for lack of a better word. I didn't want to use that word because it's more of a Christian context to me, but either way, it's there, right? That notion that you can overcome whatever you've gone through in the past, right? You don't have to sit in shame. You don't have to sit in regret, doubt, or guilt, no matter what you've gone through. And there are so many tools in Ifa to actually help you overcome, more than just somebody talking and saying that, it's okay. There are things that you can do, that some actionable steps that you can take that can help you to move forward and move past whatever decisions that you may have made that you feel like weren't in your best interest or what have you. All right. So if anything that I resonated with you that I talked about today resonated with you guys, and you want to go further and get more information or have services, reach out to us, Asanee 44 website. We are here to help you. Of course, we offer Ifa divination. We are a full service Ifa temple, so we do it all. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. Caucus, send me a DM, okay? You're saying you're interested in what those steps are. Send me a DM and tell me specifically what you are talking about in your personal situation, and we can handle that privately, okay? You're saying connecting with your ancestors first and second edition in African spirituality for beginners. Yes, those are my two books. So do you have a question about them, are you saying that you have them? Next live stream, not next week, because we're skipping a week now. But next live stream, I am going to discuss raising children in Ifa. For those of us in the diaspora who came into this tradition later in life, and the journey, and answering any questions that you guys may have about how to navigate that, because I have plenty of experience in that. Like, my children have gone through every transition that I've made from a spiritual perspective. And so definitely want to share parts of my journey and other people's journeys who have gone through it, and answer any questions that you guys may have about that, because this really a topic to be discussed. You have them. Thank you so much, 007 Kemet, for your support. Yes. Want to get some more out, but we are soon, excuse me, we are soon planning to get a book out, hopefully by the end of the year. Right now, we're putting out the EFAR courses, the Orisha courses, rather. So I've been steadily getting them out on the website over the past few weeks, and hopefully that will be finished by the end of the month. So if you're interested in going down that route too, guys, check out the website with our courses. So I don't have any more comments, questions, or concerns on either platform. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out, guys. I hope this information was helpful. As always, Ashe, have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond, guys.